Hi guys, and welcome back to this episode here at Mod Studio. So this one will be covering how to create a Weeping Willow within Speedtree 10. I'll take you from start to finish, created some textures, scanned bark material and a few leaf shaders that you can download on my Patreon. It will be free for my Silver and Patreon members, and for everybody who's not members there, they will be available to purchase there. So without any further ado, let's dive in. We're here in Speedtree now, and if you're wondering how to create this dark look, all you need to go is go to your Windows properties right over here in the background and select the solid. It's normally at ambient light, but you can set it to solid color, and then you can set a color that you would prefer. I prefer this grayish black because I can see the silhouette a bit better in Speedtree. So the first step is let's create our trunk, or trunks in this case, because we'll be creating 4 of them. So let's select the trunk, and I went ahead, for the sake of this tutorial, I went ahead and created some shaders here and a darker bark, and then a few leaf shaders that I will provide down in the link at my Patreon. So feel free to drop by there and check it out. So I've created the first trunk. So what you can do now is in the absolute value here at the number, let's set this to 4, and let's go down to the boundaries to the last and set this to 0.15. Okay, so now let's head over to the spine tab right over here, and let's increase this value to a value of 45, and the plus and minus random value, let's set this to 4.5. Okay, so in the orientation starting angle, let's set this value to 0.45, and the gravity, let's set this to 0.6. Don't be afraid, we'll fix this. It's not looking like a Weeping Willow at the moment. It's looking very sad. So let's quickly go to the bark and let's add this to the bark material. Replace this. So now let's amend this shape so it looks more like a Weeping Willow. So let's go into the blue curve right over here and let's add a few points. Let's add 2 points. Double click here and let's double click there, and let's select this point and let's take it to, let's say, about this point right over here, and let's lift this up a little bit there, and let's bring this third point down, way down below. Okay, and let's bring down this green point right over here. Okay, and let's amend these to suit. Okay, let's amend this a little bit more. Let's play with the blue curve here so we get something that is working for you, or that matches your reference that you have alongside you. I think this, something like this will work. Okay, so once we're done with that, let's scroll down where we see the late noise amount right over here, and let's set the amount to value of 1.4. Okay, and the turbulence, let's set this to a value of 1.85, and let's introduce some smooth setting right over there, just something like this. You can play around to match your reference a bit more closely. Okay, after we've done with this, let's head over to the shape. This is quite important. So let's select the shape right over here. In the style, let's set this to square. You can put in your own mesh if you've created in your DCC application, but in this case, I'm just using the normal square. So let's set this to a value of 7. If you're not seeing them in your viewport, just head over to the show and enable hints. Okay, so in the trunk right over here, let's go to the plus size, percentage of the size, and let's set this to a value of 4, and the absolute value, let's set this to a value of 4.5, or in this case 5 as well. Okay, so this is now set. Let's move them a bit down, the distribution. Okay, and let's move this just slightly somewhere along the line of this. So after we're done with that, let's head over to the skin tab. In the skin tab, let's amend this to 0.15. And in the blue curve, let's just amend this to be a little bit thinner at the top. Let's select that again. Let's scroll down where we see the blend options down here below. Normally we can leave this at default, but just went ahead and increase this value just a little bit more. We're not using the split and squash values here because we're using 4 trunks. Okay, and now let's head over to the UV for this, and let's enable fractional, and let's set this value to something like 1.5, and the V, let's set the scale at 0.8. So we have these longer texture being applied. So now let's head over to the displacement. In your material, normally you would have your displacement height right over here. So what we'll be doing is we'll be using, instead of the noise, we'll be using our material. So let's increase this to a value of 5, and let's introduce fine noise as well into this model to a value of a low value of 0.1. In the flares, this is quite important. We would like them to flare out here at the bottom. So let's set this value to 0.25. And the noise scale, let's set this to 3. And the height, let's determine, I only want this at the bottom, very low, a nice gradient. Okay, we're not seeing that much displacement at the moment because we need to amend our segment. So let's head over to the segments tab right over here. And let's set the plus relative value to a value of 10. As you can see, we're getting a few more detailed displacement going on. And in the absolute radial, let's set this to a value of 24. Okay, to better yet see our polygons, let's head over to the view render at the top here and let's select scribed. As you can see, we have a few more dense points. Let's head over to the orange absolute distribution and let's set this down so we have more dense polygons at the bottom and less at the top. Okay, let's set this back to standard view. So this is now it for the base of our Weeping Willow. Now we need to set our first tier branches. So let's go ahead and let's zoom a bit out here and let's deactivate these hints so we can't see them. Okay, let's deactivate this forces tab right over here. Okay, so now let's select our trunk right over there and add geo. Let's head down to purification. Okay, and in the purification branches, let's set the generation tab to the mode to interval, and let's set the frequency to a value of 1.1. Even 1 can work. Let's set this to 1.1 and let's set the count to 2. So let's introduce some spread value to a value of 3 and the spiral amount. Let's set that to 1.15. In the first and last boundary, let's set the low value here to a value of 25 or 0.3. And let's scroll down where what we normally do is extend parent and let's set this to any, and we'll not be using any knockout amount here. All right, so now the next tab, let's head over to the spine tab. And in the spine tab, seeing that we're using the shape of our trunk, these options right at the top there won't be affecting anything. We'll be using this shape scale at the bottom. Okay, so let's set this value to a value of 0.86 and let's give this a random value of 1.5. So in the starting angle, let's set this a value of 0.35 and the green curve, normally it would be set on the trunk because we only had one parent right over there. So let's just set this down to, we want the top ones to be pointing a bit more up to the sky and the bottom ones a bit lower. So now the next step is let's introduce also some gravity to this. So let's set this value of 0.4 and the ancestor, let's take this down a notch to a value of 2.5. So now let's edit our blue curve right over here for the gravity shape and let's add a few points here. Double click to add a few points. Let's take this one down and this one also a bit down. Let's set this one right over here. Let's select that again, and in the green curve right over here, also in the trunk mode, let's apply this gravity to be more at the bottom and less at the top to what would look good for you. So once we're done with that, let's scroll down again. Let's head over to the late noise. So let's set this value to 0.8 and the turbulence to a value of 0.8. And let's introduce some smoothing here as well. So now let's head over to the forces tab. So let's select our first tier branches here and right click, add forces, and let's add a direction. Let's rotate this upwards, and in the forces tab right over here, let's set this value a low value to 1.5, and in the green curve, let's take the bottom ones down and only have the top ones directing upwards. Okay, so now let's scroll down. Let's leave everything here as default, and in the shape, nothing to do there. And in the skin tab, let's set our absolute value to 0.8. Let's clamp to parent. Let's set that on. Good practice to have. And in the green curve right over here, let's take this top one down and let's introduce this one top there. And same goes for the scale here of the branches at the end. Okay, and let's scroll down. Let's leave everything here as default. And let's head over to the UV, and then the UV tab. Again, let's enable fractional amount here. Let's set this value to a value of 8. Okay, and in the V here, a value of 5 will do. Okay, so let's head over to the displacement. Yet again, the same process. Let's select the material. Let's add some displacement here. Let's say a value of 2. And in the amount for the fine noise, let's set the value of 0.5. Again, let's go over to the segments tab. And in the segments tab, let's introduce a few more segments here in the length value and the plus relative. And same goes for the absolute radial. Okay, so now let's add this was our first tier, let's add our second tier of branches. And by doing this, let's select our purification branches right over here and let's add geo. branches, purification branches. And in the spine tab, let's quickly disable shape control because we want to manually control these ones. So let's go back to the generation tab right over here, and let's set this value to 3. And let's scroll down again. Let's set this to any, and let's take the first and last boundaries to 1.5 there. And in the green curve right over here, let's set this to tree, or the entire tree. And let's take this one down, and let's take this one way up, so we have more at the top, less at the bottom. So once we're done with this, let's go over to the knockout and just introduce a few knockout here. A value of 2 will do. Now, after we've done this, before we head over here, let's scroll up here to the spacing, and in trunk mode, let's take the top ones a bit down there, not too much. Okay, so now let's head over to the spine tab, and yes, let's select the beautification branches right over here, and let's make them longer at the points and longer at the beginning points right over there. Okay, and the starting angle, let's leave everything here as default, and let's introduce some gravity here of 2.5. And again, let's select the green curve on the beautification. Let's make them less apparent at the beginning, and let's scroll down. Let's go over to the late noise here again, and in the late noise, let's introduce a few amount here. Let's set this to 1.6, and the turbulence, let's set this to 5 as default, and introduce some smoothing. Okay, so let's leave everything rest there as default. Okay, and one more thing to do here in the gravity amount is the following. Let's scroll up here quickly, and in the gravity right over here, let's go over to trunk mode, and let's take this one down, way down, and this one a bit more. Yeah. Okay, so now again, let's go over to the forces tab, and in the forces tab, let's allow our direction that we have there, and let's leave everything there as default. You can play with this a bit more. Let's set this to trunk and finesse this so what you want there. Okay, so now let's go over to the skin tab of this, and let's play with the skin tab here. Let's set this plus relative value to parent 2.5, and the absolute, let's set this to 0.4. Okay, but let's enable clamp parent. So we'll always clamp to the existing parent that we have there. Okay, so now let's scroll down. Let's check everything here. Let's leave everything here as default. You can play with these values right over here of the spread value to something like this. Let's over to the UV. Let's enable fractional, and let's set this to 0.6 and the starting here to 0.8. But let's go over back to the skin tab here, and in the green curve right over here, let's set this to trunk. Let's take them down here so they're less thick at the top and more thick at the bottom, and let's select the tree, and let's do the same there as well. Okay, so now let's go over to the displacement in the same process as the branches before. Let's select this and set this to material. Let's set the value of 0.5, and the same goes for the fine noise 0.2. And in the segments tab right over here, let's introduce a few more segments. Let's set this to 76. The absolute value, let's set it to a value of 8 and 1. So that is it for the second set of branches. Now let's add our third set of branches. So right click in this. Let's go to branches, purification branches, and in the settings here, let's go over to generation, and let's set this value to 0.4 and the spread amount to 1.5. So now let's set the first and last boundary to 1. Okay, and just a slight knockout, not too much. And in the generation tab, let's scroll down and set the extend parent to any. So now in the spine tab, we have a few things to do here. So in the spine tab, in the plus percentage to parent, let's set this value to 0.6. Okay, and in the starting angle, let's set this to a value of 2. All right, and in the green curve right over here, let's take this so it's more spread out there. And let's go back to the parent generator there, and let's set the angle to 0.5. Let's go back to the spine, and in the spine here, let's go over to the gravity and introduce a little bit of gravity, 0.8. All right, and in the green curve, we have our trunk. Let's select this to trunk, and let's take this down so they're more adhering to the gravity at the lower part of the tree than at the top. And let's set the tree, let's do tree as well, and let's do the same there. And let's disable ancestor here. Let's set this to 0, and let's scroll down where we see yet again the late noise, and let's introduce some late noise here, a value of 1.5, and let's set this to default, and let's introduce some smoothing there as well, just a little bit. Okay, so now in the forces tab, let's enable this cam, and in the green curve right over here, let's select this to purification. Let's deactivate this, and let's go over to the trunk mode, and let's take this down again. So let's head over to the skin tab and let's set this to a value of 2.5 and the absolute to a very low value of 0.1. And again, let's clamp this to parent. All right. And in the green curve right over here, let's set this to trunk and let's take the top one a bit more up and let's set this to tree and let's take the green curve just a little bit down there. So now let's scroll down and let's just enable some upper scale and lower scale for the spread value there. And in the UV tab, what we can do here is let's enable fractional and let's set this to 0.5. And for the V, let's set this to 0.85 again. And we leave this to automatic and unrestricted. In displacement, let's set the same again. Source, let's set this to material. Let's add a bit of noise there, 0.5. And then the fine amount, 0.2. Let's head over to the segments tab. Again, let's optimize this by adding a few more points here and set this to 3 and let's set this to 6, maybe set this to 1. Just watch your quads and polygons right up the top. So that's it for the third set of branches there. So now let's move over to the fourth set of branches. So it's just a repeating pattern that's happening here. So let's select these again and right click, add geo. Branches, purification branches. Okay, so now in the generation tab right over here, let's head over there and set this to a value of 2.6. If the keyboard is listening to me, 2.6. And let's set the last boundary here to a low value of 0.1 because we want them growing right at the point there. And again, let's set this to any. Let's introduce a few knockout here, a bit more here this time. And in the green curve here, let's set this to trunk and let's take this upwards because we want them to be doing this more at the lower part of the tree than at the top. So that is it for the generation there. Let's over to the spine tab, and in the spine tab, let's leave that as default. Okay, and in the starting angle, let's set this to 0.2, and in the green curve right over here, let's take this a bit up there so it's spread out more at the point of where the branch begins, and let's take this down. So let's again introduce a bit of gravity, just a little bit, 0.7. Let's disable ancestor amount there, and in the late noise, let's scroll down where we see late noise. Let's leave this as default. Just introduce some smoothing, introduce a few more of the amount there, and let's head over to the forces tab. Let's enable this, and let's go over to the green curve and set this to trunk. Let's take this down, and the same goes for the tree amount. Let's leave all these as default. Let's head over to the skin tab, and in the skin tab, let's set this to 1. And again, same principle, clamp to parent, and let's scroll down where we see the spread amount. Let's introduce some spreading, more spreading right over here as so, and over to the UV, let's enable fractional again, and let's set the fractional value to 0.4, and the V, let's set this to a value of 0.8. So in the displacement amount, let's select this again, let's set this to material, a value of 5, and in the fine noise, a value of 2. Head over to your segments tab, and in the segments tab here, let's optimize this a bit further, introduce a few more polygons here. Let's set the plus relative value to 1, and let's set this to 5. So that is it for the fourth set of branches here. And now let's go over to the the fifth set of branches here. Okay, so now again, same principle, right click in your seam, add geo, branches, purification, that'll generate a few there. So yes, this will be now the last set of branches. Then we'll be adding our long stems or spines in this case for the leaves that we'll be applying. Okay, so now in this one, let's head over to the generation tab right over here and set the spacing value to something 0.45, and in the first and last boundary, let's set this to a very low value to 0.1. Let's set this to extend to any, and in the knockout value, let's set this to 0.2, and let's align this to 0.5. But let's just go back again quickly to the other set of branches right over there, and let's set this value to 0.7, and let's just check the earlier one as well, and so on. Okay, so now let's head over to the spine tab right over here, and in the spine tab, let's make sure the starting angle is at 0.2. okay, and what we'll be adding again is a bit of gravity to 0.7, and let's disable ancestor amount there. Okay, and in the late noise again, let's add a few late noise here. Let's set this to 1 and introduce some smoothing, and Let's go over to the skin tab here as well. Let's select this and set the value here to 1. Let's amend the blue curve right over here. Let's make it a little bit thinner. Okay, and in the welding, this is quite important. As you can see there requires quite a few there. So let's disable the welding, because we won't be seeing this close, so it's more optimized. And let's scroll down, let's leave this as default, and let's head over to the UV. In the UV tab, let's enable fractional again. Let's set this to 0.6, and the V, let's do the same to 0.6. So now it's not necessary to add displacement on this level. Let's go over to the segments tab. Now this is quite important. Let's set this to a lower value now to optimize this a bit more, and let's set this value to 1 and the radial to 5. Okay, so now that was the last set of branches that we've added to our Weeping Willow. So now we need to create our stems for our leaves to grow off. Okay, so what I like to do is I select these branches right over here, and let's select one here, and let's souther this out. Okay, so now we can focus on this. So let's select this last set of branches right over here, and in the generation tab, let's set this to 0.1, and let's set this to 0.99. Okay, so now let's select this, and in the branches right over here, let's select our tweaks, and then the tweaks tab, let's set this to follow taxi, and in the settings, let's set the arrangement to alternating discotus, and in the spine tab right over here, let's introduce a length of 0.45. So now in the spine tab, let's introduce a lot of gravity here, and then the skin tab, let's go over there and let's make sure the enable weld is off, and in the segments tab, let's reduce this. Okay, let's introduce optimization. Let's set this to 6. And in the length tab right over here, let's set this to a low value of 2. Okay, so let's zoom in here and let's activate our scribe mode. Just to make sure. And in this value, let's leave this to absolute 0. And now what we can do is let's head over to the branches right over here, and in the skin tab, let's make the endpoints just a little bit thicker, so some of those tweaks get back there. And in the tweaks right over here in the skin tab, let's introduce a kill length ratio. Let's increase this to 1.50. So let's add our fonts to this. Okay, and in the range tab, let's set this to standard from the keyboard. Let's bring this back. So now we can gradually increase our tweaks here in the kill death ratio there. Let's set this to 2, and in the generation tab right over here, let's make sure the knockout is a bit more, and in the verification branches right over here, let's take this down a bit to 1.5 or 1.4. Okay, now in the tweaks right over here, let's go over to the generation tab, and let's take this down to a value of, let's say, gradually take this down to 4. See what happens. Take it down to 3. Let's set this to 1. Okay, it's still working. Let's set this to 0.5. Okay, let's deactivate these again so we can see our fronts here. Okay, so we need to make this a bit more dense. So in the skin tab right over here, let's add another value here. Let's set this to 3. Okay, and in the generation tab, let's go back and let's set this to a value of 2. Okay, so now we have something more thicker here. And in the tweaks tab right over here, let's go over to the spine tab. Let's make sure our length is a bit longer. Let's set this to 5. Maybe let's set this to 5.5. Let's make this to be a little bit more thinner at the bottom wall at the cluster of your leaf or your branch system. And in the skin tab, let's set this to only. Okay, so now let's deactivate this. Okay, let's give this time to generate. Okay, and here is a great feature that I love in Speedtree 10. It has this new shaded prune mode. So where the sun doesn't come in the dense areas, there won't be any leaves there. So let's activate this. Just give it a few seconds just to calculate. As you can see, the sun is starting to shine through here, which is a cool effect that it gives you. Okay, so now in the front system right over here, let's scroll down where we see the width. Let's make this a little bit thinner. Let's set this to 6.5, and let's just make them a slightly longer, 1.1. So now the only thing that we'll still need to add to this Weeping Willow is the root system. So for the sake of this, let's quickly just hide, and let's select the fronts, H on the keyboard, so they're hiding. And the same goes for all of these, H on the keyboard. Okay, so now let's zoom in here and select our trunk. Right click in the scene, let's go to decorations and roots. Let's just give it a few moments to sync up here. And let's select our roots. As you can see, they're highlighted by the shape control, so they're not appearing. So let's go over to the spine tab and let's disable shape control there. Give it a few seconds. So let's amend these ones here. Let's go over to the UV tab. Firstly, let's enable fractional there. Okay, and let's set this to a value of 0.5 or maybe 2.6 or something like this. And the same goes for the twigs. Let's enable fractional and let's set this to 0.6. In the generation tab, let's scroll down, and in the position, let's just take them a bit down. Okay, and in the roots, the main roots, the same. Let's take the position just a bit down. Now let's go over to the skin tab, and in the, look at this. Okay, the up value, let's take this a bit down. It's too much for my taste, so let's take it to about value there. And in the skin tab, let's scroll up where we see the profile. Let's make this a bit thicker at the ends, not too much, otherwise it will disappear. Also, let's move over to the spine tab, and let's set this to a value of 1. Right click on these, add force, direction. Let's leave it at default, just taking it down. Okay, and just lastly, let's add a few details to this trunk as well. Let's go over to this, add geo. In the decorations, let's locate the lump. I like using these because it's more, let's give it some more offset. Let's set this to 1.5, and let's generate some more. Let's set this to a value of 15, and let's take down the last boundary to a value of 0.5, so they only appear in these lower areas right over here. So let's just select this to 3.5, and let's go back to the geometry, and let's take this offset to a value of 6. Okay, and let's enlarge these. Okay, so now let's bring back everything here gradually. The first set of branches, let's take these ones, let's bring them back. And let's quickly just disable these, H on the keyboard, and let's bring back our front system here. Okay, and let's zoom out. Okay guys, so that is it for the Weeping Willow tutorial. If you found this tutorial useful, hit that like and subscribe button down below, and don't forget to check out our Patreon page. It will help us a lot. So stay safe and take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.